The Portal from Hell. Partnya, the beginning. The town of Black Rock, Maine, was a quiet place where nothing ever happened. Everyone knew everyone else, and the days dragged by like thick syrup. But on one autumn evening in 1994, 4 teenagers, Jake, Emily, Ben, and Sarah, found something that would change their lives forever. They had been inseparable since childhood. Jake, a dreamer with a guitar in his hands, was always the life of their party. Emily, an artist with her sharp mind and her talent no one understood. Ben, quiet and thoughtful, lost in the world of math and science. And Sarah, bold and brash, dreaming of fame and recognition. It all started in the attic of Jake's old house. His grandfather, Mer Harper, had passed away, leaving behind mountains of junk. Among the dusty boxes and old photographs, they found her book. It was massive, with a worn leather cover and pages filled with strange symbols. Runes. The book was written in an unknown language, but it contained illustrations, circles, spirals, symbols that seemed both ancient and sinister. The teenagers, fascinated by the occult and horror movies, decided to unravel its mystery. Part 2: The Ritual. They began experimenting. They drew runes on walls, on the ground, on their own bodies. Nothing happened. But one night, when the moon was full and the air was thick with tension, they decided to perform a ritual. The location was an old forest outside of town. There, among ancient trees, they drew a circle of runes, lit candles, and chanted the words they had found in the book. At first, nothing happened. That was pointless, Ben said, disappointed. Just a bunch of nonsense. But the moment he spoke those words, the ground beneath their feet shook. The air filled with a thick fog, and in the center of the circle, a portal appeared. It was black, like an abyss, and from it came sounds that made their blood run cold. Moans, screams, whispers. What the hell is that? Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Hell, Jake answered, his eyes fixed on the portal. They stood there, mesmerized, unable to move. But curiosity got the better of them. They stepped through the portal. Part 3: Hell. What they saw was beyond human comprehension. The portal closed behind them, leaving them in complete darkness. The air was thick and heavy, as if it could be cut with a knife. Jake was the first to turn on the flashlight he had brought, just in case. The beam of light revealed fragments of a landscape that seemed both endless and confined. Where are we? Emily whispered, her voice shaking. Hell, Ben replied, his face as pale as chalk. They stood on a narrow path surrounded by rivers of fire. The water wasn't water but something like molten metal, hissing and bubbling, sending sparks into the air. In the distance, there were mountains, but they weren't made of stone. They were alive, their slopes breathing and pulsing like giant hearts. We need to go back, Sarah said, but her words lacked conviction. How? Jake asked, turning around. The portal was gone. They moved forward, not knowing where they were going. The path led them through a maze of rocks and rivers of fire. Time flowed differently here. Minutes felt like hours, and hours felt like an eternity. Soon, they began to hear sounds. At first, it was a whisper, barely audible, like wind through leaves. But it grew louder, turning into screams, moans, prayers. "Those are voices," Ben said, his eyes wide with terror. "They are speaking in every language." They passed by a group of creatures that defied description. They aren't human or animal but something in between, hunched figures with long limbs and faces that constantly shifted, as if molded from clay. "Don't look at them," Emily whispered, but it was too late. One of the creatures turned toward them and hissed, revealing a mouth full of sharp teeth. They ran. The path twisted like a snake, leading them deeper into the nightmare. At one point, they came across a massive cave, inside of which burned a fire. But it wasn't an ordinary fire, it was black, like soot, and glowed from within like embers. "That's a gateway," Jake said, his voice filled with dread. "It leads even deeper." "We don't need to go there," Sarah said, her hands trembling. "We need to find our way out." They skirted the cave and kept moving. Soon, they came across a bridge that hung over a chasm. The bridge was made of bones, held together by something like sinew. "We can't cross that," Ben said, but Jake was already stepping onto the bridge. "We don't have a choice," he said. The bridge creaked and swayed under their weight, but it held. On the other side, they saw a light, faint, flickering, like a distant star. "That's the way out," Emily said, her voice filled with hope. They ran toward the light, but their path was treacherous. The ground beneath their feet was covered in something like slime that clung to their shoes. The air grew thicker, and it became harder to breathe. When they reached the light, they saw that it wasn't an exit but a mirror. Huge, black as night, it reflected their faces, but not like a normal mirror. Their reflections were distorted, eyes too large, mouths too wide, as if they were demons. "It's a trap," Ben said, but Jake was already reaching out to touch the mirror. The moment his fingers brushed the surface, the mirror shattered, and they were caught in a whirlwind. It spun them like leaves in a hurricane and spat them back into the forest where they had begun. The portal closed behind them, but something had changed. They felt different, stronger, more confident, as if a piece of that darkness had stayed with them. Part Carter, success. From that moment on, their lives began to change. Yake, who had always dreamed of being a musician, suddenly wrote a song that became a hit. It happened in a single night. He woke up with a melody in his head, so clear it was as if someone had sung it to him in his sleep. He picked up his guitar, and the words poured out. "That's the best song you've ever heard," his friend said when Jake played it for the first time. The song, which he called Black Mirror, went viral. It played on every radio station, downloaded millions of times. Part pays the price. Over time, the friends began to drift apart. jealousy, envy, ambition, it all ate away at their relationships. Jake and Emily, who had always been close, started dating, but their relationship was full of passion and pain. Ben, who had always been in love with Sarah, couldn't handle her success and popularity. Sarah, in turn, felt lonely despite her millions of followers. They forgot about the portal, the runes, the horror they had seen. But the portal didn't forget about them. Yake was the first to die. It happened during a concert, while he was performing his biggest hit. The stage collapsed, and his body was found crushed. Everyone called it an accident, but Emily knew the truth. She had seen the shadows from the portal whispering to him before he died. Emily couldn't cope with the loss. She withdrew into herself, and her paintings became dark and terrifying. On a day, she was found in her studio. She was sitting in front of her canvas depicting a black abyss. Her eyes were empty, and her smile was frozen on her lips. The doctors called it suicide, but Ben and Sarah knew better. Ben tried to forget. He left town, enrolled in a prestigious university, but the nightmares followed him. He saw the portal in his dreams, heard voices calling him back. On a night, he couldn't take it anymore. He was found in his dorm room, the walls covered in runes, his body mutilated as if he had been trying to escape someone's grasp. Sarah was the last one left. She tried to move on, but her success became her curse. Her followers began noticing strange things in her photos, shadows that moved, faces that shouldn't be there. On a day, she received a message from an unknown user: "You forgot about us. They're coming for you." She tried to run, but the portal found her. It happened in her home. She woke up in the middle of the night to a sound she knew all too well. The portal opened in her bedroom. She saw them, her friends, their faces twisted in pain and fear. They reached up to her, whispering, "Come back." Sarah survived. She was the only one who managed to close the portal, using the same runes that had opened it, but the cost was high.